I could be assuming wrong, but it seems like you're against the current administration's tariff plan.
Yeah.
What would you do different? Because no one's giving actual solutions.
Yeah, so I think what you do is you peg it basically you do what they're pretending to do. So what they said they were doing is they're kind of scanning all of the different countries, and they're saying, okay, here's some countries that are really not trading with us on fair terms. Like they're restricting our trade with them, or they're artificially manipulating their currency. China does this for sure.
What does that mean?
Right?
To artificially manipulate your currency?
So in a nutshell, the cheaper the exchange rate, the more you're going to export, because the cheaper your goods are, right? So the strong dollar, right? Basically, the weaker the dollar is, actually, the cheaper our stuff looks to the rest of the world, and the more they're going to purchase our things. So if you're China, one thing you're going to do is it sounds counterintuitive. Like usually you think like a nationalistic country, we want our currency to be super strong.
You make your currency cheap, so you have a competitive advantage.
Yes.
Now, how does that
like think about if you ever traveled in like Southeast Asia and the dollar's doing really strong, you're like, wow, I'm going to buy like everything here in Thailand.
It's the first thing,
right?
Like when you go to Europe and you find out the euro's like, there are moments where it's like under the dollar, and you're like, oh my God, let's go. I'm getting this hotel.
Dude, if I go to India, I want a 5-star hotel. It's $200, $300 a night.
Right. So that applies on everything from, your experience as a tourist to like major industrial production, right?
And how does one do that? Do they print more money?
So you can print more money. You can buy and sell bonds. You can, some countries just officially set an exchange rate and then use their central bank to do. There's all kinds of ways to do it. But the point is, part of trading deals is you're supposed to promise not to do it. And so what I'm saying is, what you do is you look for a place where there's an unfair trading practice. And then you respond and you say, okay, you either drop this trading practice or we're going to impose these restrictions on how you trade with us, which again is exactly what they say they're doing, but it is not what they're doing.
What are they doing?
You can tell. They came up with this weird formula. It's actually the same thing that ChatGPT would suggest if you just asked ChatGPT, like, hey, like make up a table of how I should charge tariffs. They used a totally different measure called the trade deficit, which we could get into, and said, okay, if whatever the trade deficit is, we're going to do this formula off of that. And by the way, there was a math mistake that a conservative think tank discovered in the way they did it. And they just randomly applied. There were islands that don't even have people. There are islands that are actually like US, UK.
I heard that this is
like
a little bit of a
presence.
misnomer, though. I heard that there was a language, there was a little confusion with language, where they said reciprocal, but it was supposed to be proportional.
Either way, it showed the sloppiness of the process.
Sure, in terms of the communication, but if the actual process, and I don't want to seem like I'm defending the administration, but I do want to seem like it's important that we get true information out there.
Yep.
So it's like if they're doing proportional tariffs to that trade deficit, that would make sense. If it's reciprocal, it doesn't make sense because there's no way you could match a trade deficit from a country that is
right. But what I'm saying is, I
think
think it also doesn't make sense as policy. Like a trade deficit may or may not be helpful to us economically. Actually,
Right.
It's not just a simple thing that like trade deficit bad. So what I'm saying is, you use the tariffs in a much more targeted and specific way when you know that you either have that kind of unfair trade situation, or you're trying to protect a certain industry that you think is vulnerable domestically, right? But it's really important to know what you're doing, or else a whole bunch of people get screwed in the process. Like the other day, I was having breakfast in Michigan out, and a couple of people came up to me. They run like a little shop that was right next to the breakfast place where I was eating. And the woman who runs it said, I'm not sure what we're going to do. It's like clothes and like bags and stuff. And they source stuff from all over the world. And she said, we just put an order in. We don't even know how much it's going to cost us. And I don't know what I'm going to do for next month. I got some inventory here I can use this month, but we're going to be screwed, especially if we don't even know how to plan. Because the other thing you need to do, it's like any form of diplomacy. Like you do shots across the bow, you make clear what if you do this, we're going to respond that way. And there has to be some like logic to it or order to it if you want to shape the behavior of other countries, right? And what we're seeing instead is this like really like chaotic, like grab ass policy where like he changes his mind every couple of days on things, right? And that makes it that much harder, especially if you're a small business or if you're a giant corporation. You have all kinds of hedges and like ways you can maneuver through this.
Or they'll just remove the tariffs. That was another thing that really frustrated me. If you're going to put the tariffs on, put them on everything.
Seems to me like, hold it.
Yeah,
right, now they're like picking and choosing what they're going to
Yeah, so now Apple doesn't have the tariffs. And it's just like, but to me that frustrated because Apple is the one that should be paying more than anybody. They're the one that parks their money overseas. They're the one that's skirting the taxes. The mom and pop businesses that are fucked by the tariffs are still going to have to pay. So now you're disproportionately punishing the people that are actually doing the right thing for the country in the first place.
Yeah.
They're building their small businesses. They're paying into the system.
Yeah.
And I do think one thing that, again, I don't like the way it's executed. I don't agree with a lot of things that are happening in this administration. But I do like that it kind of shone a light on something that didn't seem like it was getting talked about by either party, which is there is a lot of decay happening, which I do. That's one thing I have a lot of hope for you, is that you live there, you reside over it, you've experienced it, and you speak to it. And I sometimes wonder if you get frustrated. You have to, I mean, you can find a more diplomatic way of saying it, but have you been frustrated at all with the way that it's worded amongst the Democratic Party, where it seems like it's a lot more identity politics, which matters, but not, to me, it's not as prescient as, I don't know, some people are pressing as people who can't afford to feed their families and are losing jobs.
Yeah, especially because like there are a lot of people that I think Democrats are understood to care about. Like low-income people, black and brown people are like disproportionately caught up in the economic pain when something like this happens. And so I do think my party needs to do a much better job, especially with the kind of finger wagging that you're talking about. I think we are like very prone to that. And I've seen it happen on any side. I think a lot of people, you get this sense of like moral conviction, and you're so sure of it that you start to think it makes it okay to be an asshole, because you're deep down, like the thing, and this is like far right and far left movements through the ages. But I think it's definitely true of far right and far left in the US right now. You just think like you can treat people however you want. You say whatever you want about them because like
they're evil.
They're evil. And if they win, all is lost.
Yeah. And their pain becomes intellectualized. Like you'll see like think pieces of like, why does the South love MAGA? Like how can we like why is neo-Nazism on the rise through like a chart? And I feel like it misses the feeling of, low income people saying like, no, we're in pain.
Yeah. And I think pain is a really important place to start, because like if you encounter somebody in pain and you approach that with compassion and you actually listen, that's a very different place to come from than like either how can I use this or how am I going to judge the choices that this person made while in pain. Yeah. Especially if they have developed, very understandably, a distrust of everybody. Yeah. Right.
So what are things the Democratic Party can do better? Because like you go speak to both sides.
Dude, we've begged so many Democrats to come on this platform.
You were the only guy that agreed, and then you had to back out allegedly because you had to do debate prep.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
That seems like a big deal.
I'm glad it worked out in the end.
Good excuse. But we've been trying to. It was like Mark Cuban, who was obviously a surrogate for the party, and he came on. He was fantastic. But like everybody we asked, is they just wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Look, there's this even like going on.
I don't want to get away from Alex's question.
No, but I mean, to your point, like part of it is like, where do we go? Right. To me, especially after we lose, our party or any party has this debate of like, what do we have to say and how do we say it? To me, there's actually three things we need to deal with. What do we have to say? I mean, like the policies, the ideas. If they're right, we should hold to it. If we're not so sure they're right, we should rethink them. All right, so there's that. Then there's how do we say it? That's the tone, the message, the style, whether people feel like you're wagging a finger at them or not, whether people think you get the kind of pain they're going through or not, right? And then the part nobody talks about is where we say it. And I think right now where we say it is kind of everything, because there are so many spaces where people, like I'm sure you don't think yourselves as maybe a political show or a news show. Yeah. Like the reality is there's probably a lot of folks who like this is where they're getting their news because like they're not sitting watching CNN. I mean, I remember the moment when I was back in college that I realized I was getting more of my news from the Daily Show than I was from like news sources, right? Yeah. And so I think it's really important for anyone practicing politics, and definitely my party after what just happened to it, to be saying, okay, where else do we need to be? And like, it's all well and good for me to keep going on Fox News, and I will, although they don't seem to be inviting me as much lately. But, a lot of...
He just called y'all pussy.
I like that.
Talk your shit. Talk your shit, Pete.
I'm just saying, like, we were really close to having a conversation about the whole, like, signal gate, you put the wrong dude on your classified.
And what happened? Then they canceled it?
Just didn't quite get around
Was Was it
booking me.
debate prep?
So,
They were working on something.
they were busy. Yeah. But like, a lot of people aren't watching left, right, or center. They're not watching like television, cable news all the time, right?
Yeah.
And I think my party has this illusion that we're the savvy ones about tech. And 15 years ago, we were, right? Like we were onto things like Facebook and social media, probably a little more than the right was, or we were there first. But at least since 2016, the Twitter election, like that has been true less, right?
Yeah.
So I think we need to be prepared to go everywhere. And that's always been my style. I mean, largely because I had to when I was first running for president. I would talk to anybody who would listen, which at first wasn't a lot of people, and I would go to any place that would have me. But, to go back a little bit in what I was saying, like I do think we also need to revisit like what it is we're offering. Because if it sounds like what we're offering is, let's just go back. This isn't working out. Obviously, the tariffs are hurting people. He's consolidating absolute power. Like lots of things are bad about this, which is true. Therefore, let's go back to that.